the University of Arizona Bio5 Institute, we bring together hundreds of multifaceted experts that include world-class bioscientists, engineers, physicians, and computational researchers. This team science approach is designed to ignite creative solutions to the many complex biological challenges facing our families and communities, and has resulted in disease prevention strategies, promising new therapies, innovative diagnostics and devices, and improved food sustainability.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Science Talks, a conversation hosted by the University of Arizona's Bio5 Institute. My name is Amy Randall Barber.
And I'm Lisa Romero.
The definition of infertility is the inability to get pregnant after 1 year of trying to conceive. It is estimated that 15% of couples will have trouble conceiving, and globally near 50 million couples experience infertility every year. Many factors can contribute to female infertility, including exposure to endocrine-disrupting chemicals, or EDC, which are highly present in many of our everyday products. Today, we are joined by reproductive toxicologist, Dr. Zelieann Craig, who is working toward reducing the incidence of infertility by improving our understanding of how these chemicals interact with the female reproductive system. Dr. Craig is a Bio5 member, Associate Professor of Physiological Sciences, and as well as the Assistant Dean for Research in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Craig.
Thank you so much for this invitation and this opportunity to be here with you.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really excited to talk to you. And I don't even know that we knew this correlation when we finally came to a date to talk to you today, but today is actually in social media campaign world, the International Women's Day. So that's pretty exciting. I think it's perfect for the framework of your work and also your career. So I just wanted to kind of give a shout out because you are the perfect example of why at Bio5 and the U of A, I think we celebrate women every day. But yeah, that was pretty cool. So on that note, Amy said some of the statistics, and maybe you can help, shed some light on some other things. But I know that many millions of women and girls of reproductive age in the U.S. Have challenges with specific health issues related to being a female, and it's obvious that research like yours is necessary to support their health through puberty, pregnancy, and menopause, and to help them achieve pregnancy if they so desire. How common are the chemicals that are dangerous to these biological functions, and where are they found, and how can some of the work you're doing today help move the needle on these challenges?
Yes, so a lot of the endocrine disrupting chemicals, they're very difficult to just pinpoint with one specific mitigation strategy, because they are a variety of chemical classes. So some that are very popular are plasticizers. A lot of people know about the pesticides, but there are others that we don't think much about, which could be those that are in flame retardants and nonstick cookware. And the specific group that I study are phthalates, or phthalate esters, and these are not only found in plastics, but they are also found in personal care products and some medications that are coated in plastic so that they get released further down in the gastrointestinal system. So they are very ubiquitous. They're everywhere, and it's very difficult to avoid exposure to them. So you can imagine it's very important that we understand what they do and where they are, and so that we can help not only provide information to women on how to avoid them, but also for populations who cannot avoid it, either because they live in a region that is contaminated, or Their occupation makes them more, likely to be exposed to them. So people that can't avoid it, at least we can provide some information to come up with, strategies to treat any of the outcomes of being exposed to them, come up with some mitigation. Yes.
Oh, that is fascinating and also scary. As a female, as the mother of two girls, and as you said, not even realize, you're cooking, you're cooking what you think is something healthy in a pan, and potentially the pan can be causing issues, and it's very frightening, I think, and why your work is really important. But how did you get into this? I mean, when you were in school, what did you think you were going to do, and how did you kind of land on this?
Yeah, so I was always interested in how the body works, and how different organs failing to do their function could lead to disease. But I completed a summer experience actually at University of Arizona, and as an undergraduate. So I was an undergraduate in Puerto Rico, and I came to Arizona. It was my first time in Tucson. And the PI that I was paired with, she was a reproductive toxicologist. And my notion that, organs breaking is what led to disease was challenged by the idea that an organ can be perfectly healthy, but be affected by a poison, and that poison leads to disease. And on top of that, because she was a reproductive toxicologist, she was looking at a compound that actually was pretty silent in causing ovarian toxicity. So a lot of the people that were exposed back then, it was an occupational chemical, so only women working in the factory were affected by it. But the way that this chemical poisoned the ovary didn't allow them to find out until years later. And, I'm pretty sure everybody's heard the word menopause, and that it means that when, reproductive function ceases in women, so basically the ovaries are done with, they run out of eggs and they don't have their function anymore. And so these chemical actually could accelerate the process to go to menopause. And that's not ideal, right? Because if you're a young woman unaware of what's going on to your ovaries, a lot of professional oriented women, even so, a lot of people that are not really into like a career, they also delay having children. And so you're making these decisions not knowing what's going on in the ovaries, so that when you want your eggs your eggs into babies, they're not going to be available. And so that really inspired me. And I said, oh my gosh, I have to do something about this. I want to be part of finding that information and using that information to help women, because we know that, humanity starts with women, right? We need to have, we need to have healthy, fertile women to have healthy, fertile children. And so that was like the biggest motivation that I had.
So talk to us a little bit about some of the projects you're working on related to that. I know you're, looking at some exciting things, and obviously, time is always of the essence with our important research projects. But I think in this case, as you said, this sort of, being unaware, most people completely unaware of what is happening. And so talk to us a little bit about some of your current projects.
Yes, so some of the current projects that I have to do with using information that we have from human studies and questions that we have about exposures in humans. So there's a whole field out there that looks at levels of different chemicals in the body fluids of people, urine, blood, fluid from ovaries, and they associate that with any observed health outcomes. And so we have quite a bit of information on how different endocrine disrupting chemicals can affect reproductive outcomes in women. And unfortunately, phthalates, which are the chemicals that I study in the lab, have been associated with things like an increased risk for early menopause, or for women that are undergoing medically assisted reproduction, so an infertility treatment, they tend to respond poorly. They don't release as many eggs. Sometimes when there's a pregnancy, it doesn't make it all the way through. So we know we have that concern. And so two things inspired me about that. Some of those outcomes were related to the ovary, which is my background. I learned a lot about how ovaries are susceptible to toxicity. And the other thing is the responsibility of making sure that we have sufficient information to not instill fear, but actually have, have women be informed. Many times toxicants can be really, really toxic at high doses. Sometimes they are not at low doses. Although of interest, endocrine disrupting chemicals, they can mimic hormones. And so we cannot assume that a high dose of a toxicant will actually behave the same way when we're using low doses. So my goal was to actually provide that information, go really, really low. What's the lowest that we can go with these toxicants and determine their toxicity so that people know in conditions of that are very similar to their daily lives. And the way that we can do that in my lab, we don't work with women, we don't give poisons to women. We actually use laboratory animal models to mimic their exposures. So one of the unique things that we do in the lab is that we provide the chemicals in the format that is closest to what humans are exposed to, which is an oral exposure. And we do that at really small amounts so that, the levels that are reaching the ovaries are very similar to those that are found in women. And that's where we do our studies. And so far we've found very interesting similarities. So when we model this in the laboratory rodent, we start seeing a lot of the same outcomes that had been reported in the literature for women. So that's very encouraging to us. It tells us that we have an appropriate model. Again, and with our knowledge or your prior knowledge of how mice work, we know that there's a lot of pathways that are very similar between, mice and humans, and that we'll be able to use this information to help women and understand what their true risk is.
So that's really exciting. And for those of us that aren't scientists, let's take the science, down a little bit to a level that maybe some of our listeners might be thinking about right now, which would be, I'm trying to get pregnant. Do I need to go and, clean out my cabinets and throw away my pots and pans? And, what is some rational thinking about, where somebody should start if they're concerned about something like this?
Perfect. Excellent question. And so it is important to understand that there is a balance that we have to strive. So whatever we try to avoid in our lives, we also have to compare that to what other things we're saying no to in our condition. It's very important for me to mention at this point that I have felt that unfortunately, a lot of the mitigation strategies for example, exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals might not be accessible for everybody, because the first one that I will say is avoiding plastics. And that's something that not everybody can do. So if you cannot avoid plastics in your daily life, there's a few other things that you can do, including not microwaving them if possible. If you have a dishwasher, not putting them in the dishwasher. Do some hand washing, because we know that harsh temperatures and detergents are involved in the process of having some of the chemicals exit the plastic and get into the environment or the person. For example, if you put food in the plastic, that's and if possible, substituting glass. And that we know that a lot of our members of our population are not able to replace all the plastic in their house for glass. But some tricks include maybe going to yard sales to see if there are some people with some cheap, glassware looking for sales. Sometimes they will have some cool sales on glassware and during right before classes start at U of A. So they have everybody moving into their thing. I know there's heavily plastic in there, but you might be able to find some things, and that can help make it more accessible. Another thing is a lot of brands, popular brands, more economic brands of personal care products are coming out with lines that are free of phthalates, sulfates, parabens. These are things that, you know, the audience might have seen in products said they're free from those. Those are good to look at and try to purchase those. I think they're becoming more affordable too. And the third one is also, well, there's a couple more things. Number one is avoiding Teflon cookware. So this is not specific to phthalates, but this is to another class of compounds. And eating produce that is in season, that kind of cuts down on the pesticides on it. Because I realize not everybody's able to buy organic, tends to be quite expensive, especially now that everything is getting more expensive. The final observation or, you know, suggestion is weighing also the benefit versus the risk. So I mentioned that some of these phthalates are found in the coating of some oral medications. So it's very important for us to always look at the benefit that we're receiving from that medication and weighing that against the risk of having it coated, you know, having one of these chemicals in the coating. And that's one of the motivations for my research too, is testing really low dose exposures so that we can really have more definitive answers into, is this something that we need to be alarmed or not? Because the last thing I want is for people to feel alarmed, because stress is worse than any environmental exposure in a way, or it can exacerbate them.
Definitely. So I understand that you're pretty passionate about supporting students, especially those students pursuing careers in reproduction or environmental health sciences. Where does this passion stem from?
I have always felt this really strong passion for helping others. It started out a very young age. I wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to help students. Later on, I got really excited about science, and I said, well, maybe I need to be a physician so that I can save lives. And towards the end of my undergraduate degree, I was recruited into the minority access for research careers. And I was given essentially a fellowship to try out biomedical research. So I became an undergraduate researcher. And I think that's where I found the perfect sweet spot, because I could, you know, love my detective work as a scientist, but I could also train and become a professor, in which case I could do all that science with students. And I think that's one of the best things about my job, even though when it gets really, really hard, I just think about all the people that I have worked with and all those, you know, wonderful young minds that I helped train you know, and get them to where their dreams were. So I think that's the most satisfying part, is getting to be detective, but have, you know, all my little Padawans, you know, along the way.
Awesome. Well, that actually kind of answers my next question as well, which was, you know, just what do you do specifically to mentor and support these students? But that's amazing and wonderful. And I wish I could have had you as a professor.
Oh, well, you still can.
I know, that is true.
Your deadline is the day before I retire, so you can take your time to think about it.
Well,
Yeah,
we hope that won't be for a while, because
I know, yeah.
so many benefit from that passion. And you mentioned, you know, early in the conversation, the internship you had as an undergrad, like early on, that kind of, you know, shifted some thinking for you as well. And, you know, as you know, at Bio5, you know, we mentorship and early training is, you know, sort of embedded in what we help support and the programming we do too. And, you know, we rely so much on, you know, our members like you that share that same, you know, passion. So it's really cool.
So
Yeah.
as a graduate student, the first two people that I ever mentored were two key students.
Oh, I
So
think
this
I
is
remember
way
that
back
story.
in like 2007 or 2008, something like
Wow.
that. Yeah, we had two
I
students.
That
Yeah.
is so cool. I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
very
and that's
cool.
one of the benefits of I got my PhD here at U of A, so I've been around for a while, although not as a faculty member, but I got to, be part of so many different efforts, either as a student or now as a faculty member. And I would say one of the most fun things is to be in the graduate committees of students that are training with the people that were in my graduate committee. So
Wow.
that is always kind of like an exciting time. It's almost like getting the opportunity to return the favor for them being part of my mentorship. I get to be part of their students, success.
Full circle for sure. That's amazing. Yeah.
That's really cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We actually have a fun parting question for you that we like to ask everyone. We like to think of our researchers as superheroes. So if you were a superhero, what would your superpower be?
I love this question. Well, okay. So if I was a superhero, I think I'm actually going to give you the name. My name would be Antidote. Anti spelled as auntie, as your mom's or dad's sister. And my superpower would be to be able to heal people from poisonings by just touching them.
Wow.
Love that.
You'll
That's
take
great.
any poison.
Thinking about this question.
We are creating a new band of superheroes. We have some amazing ideas.
I know. I'm gonna have to watch all the podcasts so that I can learn all the other or the other Avengers.
Yeah,
Right? The Bio 5
definitely. Definitely a cool new movie on the horizon.
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Craig, for joining us today. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on another episode of Science Talks. For more information, please visit our website at bio5.org. From all of us at the Bio 5 Institute, we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks to our listeners for tuning in to another episode of Science Talks. Continue the conversation with us next time as we learn more about the amazing science happening at the University of Arizona's Bio 5 Institute.